Welcome to How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast, a mix of both solo episodes and expert interviews. Our ideal listener is an early career, ambitious, and passionate online language services provider. She is committed to professional growth and achieving success in the fiercely competitive translation and interpreting industry. She balances multiple responsibilities with resourcefulness, values mentorship, is open to learning, and investing in her professional development journey. She embraces technology and seeks to optimize workflow, eager to connect with like-minded peers and build out her professional network. She is determined to overcome challenges and become a sought-after freelance translator. And here's your host, medical translator and translator business mentor, Jason Willis Lee.
And welcome to How to Find More Direct Clients, the podcast that makes digital marketing both easier and more enjoyable by blending smart business strategies together with just the right touch of tech. I'm your host, Jason Willis Lee, digital marketing specialist. And today I'm very excited to introduce my special guest. His name is Stephen Lewis. He's a dynamic copywriter with a fresh and innovative take on the copy editing industry. Stephen, it's fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on. Can you start, please? Thank you. Can you start, please, by sharing a bit about your business journey, your personal journey, and your unique vision for the copywriting industry? Where are we headed?
So for me, I've been a professional writer for about 30 years, so I won't bore you with all of it. But I started in journalism. I started by editing legal journals, and then I realized I didn't want to edit other people's work. I wanted to be a writer, and I'd always wanted to be a writer. So I sent off some articles on spec to some editors, and I was really lucky that one of them didn't just throw me in the bin, and actually she took me under her wing, and I ended up writing features in Hong Kong where I lived for the South China Morning Post. And I had 2 weekly columns in the Sunday magazine at one time. So I was really lucky because I had a real showcase. And that led to companies calling me up because in Hong Kong, there is obviously not an abundance of native English speakers who can write and have the visa that allows them to write. This was in the 90s. So I had those things, and my email address was printed in the newspaper twice every Sunday. So my business then grew from there. So I ended up with corporate clients. Eventually, I moved to Australia, no longer as a journalist, but writing for the internet, writing for clients. And over time, my fascination with copywriting really grew. And if I can make a long answer even longer, there is a distinction between content writing and copywriting. And content writing is writing that educates or informs or entertains. So when I was writing for the newspaper, my job was possibly to educate you, really more to entertain you. But if I wrote an article about going on a holiday to Bali, my job was to make you think that was an interesting article and I'll buy the paper again next Sunday. My job wasn't to persuade you to buy a ticket to go to Bali. Whereas as a copywriter, your job is to persuade somebody to buy the ticket to go to Bali. So it's that extra step. And that's not a little extra step. So that's what I do now. And what I like doing it for is for people like your listeners who aren't trained in that, and therefore will, in the nicest possible way, be making some really fundamental mistakes in how they position themselves because nobody teaches you how to do it. So, you do make some pretty obvious mistakes that a copywriter can see straight away and that can change your business, change your world if you stop making those mistakes.
You're absolutely right. We as online language service providers are not trained in copywriting. I've tried hard in the last year, 2 years to give copywriting as an extra diversifying thing to my audience. So can you tell them, as a professional copywriter, what strategies have worked best for you in persuading direct clients to come and work with you, especially in a very competitive industry? I know how competitive translation is. Copywriting must be the same. How do you persuade clients to get them over the line?
With copywriting, one of the problems that you have is that nobody knows what it is, right? So I've just given an explanation of what it is, but mostly clients don't know what it is. So you've got a lot of people thinking But I write all day because I send emails all day and I write reports and I, do those things. So what are you for? Possibly you're just there to save me time, or you don't know about my industry. So somebody who listens to your podcast might come and say, but you don't know anything about translation. Therefore, how are you going to help me? And the point is, and I imagine it's not dissimilar if you're a translator, you have to know something about the subject, but you're not the expert in the subject. You're translating the writing of the person who is the expert in the subject, and you're an expert in translating that from one language to another. It is a different skill. Like, I mean, I've just finished a Joe Nesbo book, which I'm aware that I'm mispronouncing, and I understand the translator probably couldn't have written the novel, but the translator is, applying a great deal of expertise to making that novel really exciting for me to read in English. And that's the job of the copywriter, working with somebody to really understand what is special about their business, what is different about them, and what do their clients care about. So the way that you apply that to selling yourself as a copywriter is talking about what the client actually wants, which is not copywriting. It's more leads. It's ways of explaining themselves in a way that somebody who's listening to them will go, oh my God, you sound like exactly who I need to talk to. And when you start talking about those things, people say, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. Oh, I was talking to a client the other day. I'm exactly the person this client needs, but the client's looking right through me, can't possibly understand because I'm just not saying the right things. When you start talking about the problem your client has, then your client's going to pay attention. Whereas what most people do is they talk about what they do. I am a copywriter. I am a translator. And I'm like, well, I didn't wake up this morning wanting a translator, a copywriter, horse riding lessons. I woke up wanting to be the Marlborough Man. I woke up wanting to get more leads, or I woke up wanting to get my Norwegian novel read in the US market. Those are the things I woke up wanting. How are you going to help me with those? Well, let's talk. That's the key.
How important is personal branding and online visibility? I mean, we both help clients in similar but different ways. I help my coaching clients with personal branding. You help them with their copy. How important is personal branding and online visibility in attracting direct clients? So I make this distinction for my audience. A lot of us start working for agencies and end up working for agencies a lot of our careers. And we want to get to the direct clients, cut out the middleman, conditions are more lucrative, they're slightly better. That's why it's called How to Find More Direct Clients. How important is personal branding for direct client marketing, and how can freelancers stand out from the pack?
People work with people, right? So when I started as a copywriter, I'm not going to be able to do the exchange rate because one, I'm going back to 1998, right? But I know that when I started, I was about 2,000 Hong Kong dollars a day, and within a year, I was more like 8,000 Hong Kong dollars a day. So all you need to know is I'd started charging 4 times more than my peers were charging. And I used to tell them, right? Because I think we should lift each other up. There's enough work for everybody. And if clients are willing to pay 4 times more, then you should be charging 4 times more. And they just wouldn't have it. And I used to say to them, but there's how good you are, which in my experience is probably generously only 60% of the, certainly with copywriting. I mean, with translation, maybe, it's more, but with copywriting, it's 60% of the way there. 30% of it is, do I like dealing with you? Or probably 40% of it. And the remaining 10% is, do you deliver on time? Which is, of course, important. And in journalism, I mean, that's more than 10%, because if you deliver late, it's useless. But how nice you are to deal with, how enjoyable you are, is critical, because people will leave a person whom they know to be better than you, but who's a bit of an arse, to work with somebody they enjoy working with. And that's part of what your personal brand gets across is, if I pick up the phone to you, I'm at least not going to hate the interaction. So, for instance, a lot of my clients are lawyers, and lawyers have, of course, a terrible reputation. I'm not about to start making jokes about it, but it's not an unwarranted reputation on the whole. And a lot of people think, I'm going to phone a lawyer and I'm going to tell them my problem, and the lawyer is going to laugh at me because I've got myself into a predicament and what a moron am I, and the lawyer is going to spend a little bit of time making me feel like a moron or talking over my head, and I'm not going to understand what they're saying, which puts people off picking up the phone. But then when they see the personal brand of a lawyer and they're like, you sound great. Like, you're not making me feel stupid at all. And you're speaking in plain English. And I really, oh, okay, I think I'm going to pick up the phone. So I think that personal branding is important. In terms of online visibility, I guess it really depends on the individual. Like, some people may get enough work in their field by going to enough networking meetings and enough Chamber of Commerce meetings, and they might not even need a website. But your personal brand travels with you even to those networking meetings where you really need to be thinking, who do I need to present myself to these people in a way that will endear me to them?
Do you do anything to ensure repeat business? I mean, apart from treating the client well and doing your job well, do you apply a specific strategy to get a client to come back to you, the same client?
What is really helpful is if you are thinking all the time, what is something else that these guys are going to need that I can help them with? So sometimes you might be selling a sprat to catch a mackerel, right? Because they come to you, they want this thing. So in marketing, for example, nobody wants to pay for a strategy. They want a tactic. So they've decided that an ebook would be a marvelous thing to have, and an ebook is going to solve all of their problems. And if you say to them, well, talk to me about this ebook and why do you want this ebook and what's it going to do for you and what strategy is this ebook in service of? My experience is that generally, if they're strangers, they'll get the shits with you and they'll just go away because they didn't want to meet resistance. They didn't want a stranger questioning the quality of their idea. They wanted a tactic, God damn it. So sometimes you have to sell the tactic to build the trust. And as they go through the process with you of you creating a tactic, then they come to trust you. So the next thing you might say is, I think it'd be really helpful if we sat down and, came up with a strategy, like what are the things you need to do and what are the elements of that? And they'll think, well, this guy spoke a lot of sense during the course of this project. Yeah, okay, that sounds like a sensible thing to do. So it is thinking about what is something useful that they could have, and sometimes not trying to sell the biggest thing you have on offer straight away to build the trust with them, where that longer piece of work will come, bigger piece of work will come.
Before hitting record, we were chatting off camera, and we talked about the Smashing the Plateau podcast. We both appeared as guests on this podcast in the last few months with David Schreiner-Kahn, lovely man. And that is a podcast about leaving corporate life. And we were both corporate refugees. We both worked for other people at some point in our careers. Me, not for the last, since I was 30, which was nearly 20 years ago. You probably longer. How important is, and one of the things I heard I zoned in on, is that you've learned a lot from your community as you've built your community. I'm building a community as it is. I've got a micro community of about 4,000 people, or at least in terms of followers. How important is community building to you now? And what do you think are the implications for any tribe, freelance translators, freelance copywriters? How important do you think community is in general?
I think being in a community, so as a community leader, it's phenomenal for me because, we have a book club and we have, what we call challenge meetings where people can either ask to have their thinking challenged or they can talk through a challenge that they're experiencing. We use it as a double meaning. I learned so much from the feedback people in those meetings give each other because everybody, we've got lawyers and we've got a former chaplain who's done military service, who is now a copywriter. You've got all of this diversity of experience. So when somebody puts something into one of these meetings, I, of course, because I'm an opinionated person, immediately have an opinion, which I immediately, because I'm a middle-aged white man, think is the correct opinion. And what is phenomenal is I don't speak first. Like I try hard not to be the one who speaks first. And somebody will say something that makes me realize I was completely wrong. And I'm so glad I wasn't the one who spoke first, or I hadn't seen an angle on something at all. I mean, that is phenomenal. So for me, I've learned so much from the people in my community and how they approach things and what they're trying and what they're doing and who they've spoken to, what other communities they're in. And I think if you're a member of a community, particularly if you're a member of a community of, so my community is people that they're all from all different sorts of businesses, and that has its benefits. If you're a member of a community that's full of other translators, for example, getting people to be honest and share the challenges that they're having. Like if you can find people who are willing to do that, like I was trying to tell other freelance writers in Hong Kong, quadruple your prices because clients will pay. You are undercharging. And in fact, what I was trying to say to them was what I know now to what I knew then to be true and still to be true. If you undercharge, it's like your client is buying a secondhand car. And when they drive away in a secondhand car, they are listening for a rattle. They are feeling for the clutch to be soft. When they're paying Rolls-Royce prices, when they drive off the lot, they're thinking, what a comfy ride. I can't hear the clock in the dashboard. I can't even hear the other traffic. These doors are like a presidential limousine. I feel amazing about myself. And that's a money thing, right? Actually paying more money. They'd ask fewer questions. They're enjoying the ride more. They're happier because they're not constantly suspicious that something's about to go wrong. I tried to teach people that. If I'd been in a community, I could have taught more people that and learnt more from other people who'd got, who were 10 steps further down the road than I was, who could report to me from 10 steps further down the road. That to me is the phenomenal value. But you need to be in a community, I think, that makes you feel good about yourself. Because I've been in a few communities where I'm like, I don't like the way you guys talk to each other. I don't like the way, I just don't like being part of it. I don't feel supported. I don't feel I can ask a question because you're going to, be rude to me. So I guess in that sense, it depends. But if you can find a community where people will tell you honestly what's working for them and what isn't because they feel an abundance mindset, what a joy.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly met you through my community because I met Trudy Rankin through the SPI community, and through Trudy, I met you. Wonderful connection there. I love my communities. I think for your entrepreneurship, it is important to be amongst other business owners. So I try and get my people to think about themselves as business owners and not service providers. I work very hard on this sort of flip, this mindset. Just on that point, if a freelance translator, interpreter, or copy editor is listening to us thinking, "Oh, I'm probably undercharging, possibly by up to 4 times, lower than what I could charge," as Stephen is saying, how can we identify those undercharging points or the sort of ratio? Is it a question of trial and error? Is it a question of having higher paid work in the mix? How can we sort of get our prices up in general? Because I have worked with ladies, or one particular lady, who was grossly undercharging almost by 100%. And she was quite flabbergasted when I said, this is way too low. And that was a result, she said. And in the testimonial, she said, I realized that, and that was an eye-opener for me. So how can we get people charging higher prices in general? Obviously, we don't want to price ourselves out of the market, but how can we do that? Do you have a particular piece of advice for them?
The best piece of advice I have had, and it's probably one people have heard before, is if it doesn't make you, to be vulgar, as it was put to me, throw up a little bit in your mouth when you're saying the number, you're not going high enough. Like that's a really good way. So if you're not willing, so if you're charging $10 now and you're not willing to try $40, try 12. I mean, try 20, try 30. But if that's too scary for you, try 12. And then when they don't blink at 12, try 15. And then I think you'll find yourself going up in higher increments as you realize you were undercharging. The key, as I say, is Trudy. I mean, you mentioned Trudy, and Trudy and I created a training session together, which was called Yes You, How to Convince and Convert High Value Clients with Magnetic Messaging. And the whole point, in a way, of that training as I created it was it's about confidence. Because when you understand what makes you unique, and everybody is unique, like it can be very hard if you've got a job like translating, or as you've said, like copywriting. So I suspect translating, certainly true of copywriting, you think the world is full of copywriters. So how can I possibly be different? But the truth is, everyone's different. And I've been doing this for a long time, working with individuals in plenty of industries where people would say, surely one of them is exactly like the other. It's like two Big Macs sitting next to each other. How can you tell it? But you can. And when you know how, and when you really lean into that and think, yeah, actually that is me, and that is what I do, and that is my value, and I am different, that is so inspiring to say a larger number, because you're not saying, yeah, I can translate a page from X language to Y language and it's Z amount per page. You're thinking, no, I understand the value to you of this, and I understand there are other things beyond X number of pages being translated. There's how fast can I do it? How accurately can I do it? What is the feedback from native readers who really like it? Because again, I'm ignorant and monolingual, so I can't read two translations of Joe Nesbo. And, I mean, I can't read Joe Nesbo in the original Norwegian and rate the translation. But my point is, people can, and people would know. And if you are able to say, listen, it's poetry. People think my translations are poetry and are more convincing and are truer to the original. And the authors find that the feedback they get from their English language versions or their French language versions is exactly what they think it should be. Whereas previously things were translated and, they landed with a thud and the author couldn't understand why, those sorts of things. And you start to think, yes, God damn it, I do charge twice as much as the next guy. And so I bloody should. That's, and that, then there's a little bit less throwing up in your mouth.
What is the title of the Joe Nesbo novel? You're going to have to. This leads us into the final five, and I
Oh my
tend
God,
to
yeah.
ask
What is
us.
it? It was Kingdom. It's the one that came after Kingdom, and now I'm trying to remember what it is. Oh, I'm gonna get it. Oh yes, it's over. Oh my God, it's over there. The Night House.
The Night House. Okay, we'll get a link to that in the
yeah.
in
Read the
show
Kingdom
notes.
first, because that's the first. It's the follow up to the Kingdom, but it's an excellent book.
And this is a Norwegian author.
Yes, Norwegian author, huge, but I mean he sells all over the world in multiple languages. And
My wife is very fond of Camilla Lackberg. She's a Swedish author. She reads all the Camilla Lackberg, and then of course there was Stieg Larsson years ago with the Lisbeth Salander trilogy. So yeah, Scandinavian authors are big. So that was what are you reading right now? What's the biggest myth? So I mean, in the final five, we ask all our guests these questions. What's the biggest myth people believe, do you find, when it comes to copywriting? What's the biggest myth that you have to bust?
That everybody writes and therefore you're just writing. Or I mean that's one myth, but probably the most painful myth to the people who don't engage a copywriter is that they think it's about using tricks to make people buy things that they don't want, which is just not true. What I love about copywriting is that I take people who are genuinely brilliant at what they do and make that clear to people who will really, really benefit from that. And the two of them get together. Whereas what frequently happens is the person who's really, really good at what they do can't explain that. So the person who would really, really benefit walks on by and doesn't get helped, and both parties lose out. So copywriting is not about stupid tricks to make people buy another NutriBullet when they've already got a NutriBullet. That's not what it's for.
The best business advice you've ever received, or perhaps given someone else, given to a mentee?
Never discount.
Never discount. I like that.
Never discount. Offer more. So if you
more value,
tell the client it's going to be $10 and the client says, I think it should be $8, you say, well, it's going to be $10, but how about I give you this extra thing? So they're getting $12 for $10 maybe, but you are still getting $10, because the advice as I received it, which was decades ago, is if you say $10 and the client says $8 and you say fine, the client thinks you were just trying to rip them off $2 in the first place. And that's not a good look, and it's not a good vibe in your relationship.
I have a coaching product where I usually offer 5 hours over 90 days. I do 90-day sprints. And for the bonus, if someone comes in quickly before the deadline, I would say it's 6 hours. So I always increase the value, and I'll work with them fortnightly for 3 months. So that's the idea. Increase the value, don't reduce the price. Using just one word, Stephen, one word, how would you describe copywriting? What's the one word that comes to your mind immediately when I say copywriting?
Effective.
Okay, effective. That's a good one. What's the worst investment you've ever made? What's the worst investment you've ever made?
I was in a business that turned out to be a bit of a fraud, so I suppose that there was that. I was conned, so
By somebody else. Somebody else
by somebody else, yeah.
tricked you. Right. Okay. All right, let's close up. Any final thoughts or key takeaways you'd like to share with our audience? I know you have a couple of products. I'm interested in talking about these. You have ChatGPT Mastery, so perhaps you can mention how we leverage ChatGPT. I'm looking at templates and personalization myself not as we speak, but I am at that point in my ChatGPT career. And I know you have a newsletter magic. So I'm wondering, probably for my audience who don't tend to have newsletters, you and I do, because we both have a list, it would probably be ChatGPT Mastery. Could you talk about how you get us to use ChatGPT better? It's all about prompting. It's all about, I've been chatting to a friend who does the prompts in Python in a program called Jupyter, and I've been having technical discussions and fantasizing about learning Python and thinking, well, if nobody hires me, maybe I could learn Python and survive, hobble on to the rest, the end of my career. How do you do that in ChatGPT? What do you teach us in ChatGPT Mastery?
ChatGPT Mastery, because I'm a persuasive writer, is essentially a persuasive writing course disguised as a ChatGPT course, or a ChatGPT course disguised as a persuasive writing course. Because, I mean, ChatGPT does a lot of things, but it's billed as an AI copywriter. So, of course, when those tools first came along, we were really interested in that because, the robots essentially said, we're coming for you. We are AI copywriters. So what do you bring to the party? We're the robots who can do it all. So it was fascinating. And so what we teach people how to do is to use ChatGPT the way that a copywriter would use it. So it's similar to, in Australia, we have a chain of hardware stores called Bunnings, and there's one quite close to my house. Now, I could go down to Bunnings and I could get any tool out of Bunnings. And all that tool would do in my hands would enable me to make big, ugly holes in the wrong places faster than I was making them without the tools, because I don't know anything about using power tools. Hopeless. ChatGPT is similar. Like, if you don't know what's persuasive writing and how, to structure it and how to think about it and how to approach it through the eyes of the audience and so on, all ChatGPT is going to help you to do is write shit faster. What I show you how to do is how to make ChatGPT live up to its full potential as an actual copywriting robot that can write compelling copy really quickly, because you know how to make it do that, instead of you just type into it, write me an email, and it goes, okay, and then it writes you an email, and that's how you end up with the garbage that ChatGPT is associated with. But that's user error, not ChatGPT error.
Where can my listeners connect with you, Stephen? I know your agency is called Taleist, Tale, IST. Where can they connect to you and learn more about your copy?
So if you go to Taleist.agency, there are pop-ups all over the website that will invite you to join the mailing list, where you get a lot of tips on how to position yourself effectively as the obvious choice for your ideal client. Also, I have a free 5-minute course that your listeners might be interested in, and maybe you could put a link to it in the show notes, that will show you how to get ChatGPT to write in your tone of voice. So one of the big complaints about ChatGPT is it's bland. There are reasons why it's bland. So in this 5-minute video, I explain to you why ChatGPT makes everything sound bland and how to change that and make it sound exactly like you. So if you naturally sound bland, you're still stuffed, because ChatGPT will be sounding exactly like you and you're bland. But assuming you have a good human voice, we can get ChatGPT to write exactly like you. And that's a huge step forward in getting real value out of ChatGPT.
Isn't this the name of the game? It's leveraging the AI, but not being scared of AI, that it's taking our work as copywriters, as translators. It's just learning how to get the tool to work for us and not against us. Productivity. Isn't that the name of the game?
Well, yeah, I've had a lot of content writers, particularly, take ChatGPT Mastery, and they were scared because they think it's coming for their job, because that's how it's billed. That's what the newspapers want to write, because it's sensational. And I used to write for a newspaper. I get it, right? You want to sell copies, so you need extravagant headlines.
Yeah.
The reality is, when they take this course, they realize they can actually, going back to the beginning of our conversation, charge more, because they can do things with ChatGPT that their clients wouldn't have a clue how to do. And those outputs are incredibly valuable to the client. And they know how to make more margin on what they're doing, because they can get ChatGPT to do things that used to take them a long time, and now they can do quickly. But again, not things the clients can do. So I'm not talking about you go to ChatGPT, like I say, and say, write me a website, and ChatGPT goes, okay, and it writes you a brilliant website, because your client could do that and it would get a rubbish website. You will know how to write really well when you know how to use ChatGPT and actually produce valuable output, but faster, at lower expense to yourself, because you've invested in learning how to actually use the tool, instead of fall into the trap that everybody does. There's that little thin window at the bottom of ChatGPT that looks like, oh, I just type a sentence in here and the robot does everything. And actually, that's not how ChatGPT works at all, which is why you get such rubbish when you use it that way.
Stephen, one final notable nugget or takeaway for, let's say there's a listener thinking about copywriting as a viable diversification option, struggling a bit with translation, or just wanting to do something different, taking my advice. They've read my book, How to Find More Direct Clients. They think, well, maybe copywriting's for me. One final thought: how can they branch out? How can they diversify into that?
If I were limited to one final thought, it would be find a niche, because it is much easier to say, I am a brilliant copywriter for, I don't know, foreign language scientists who, need to be understood in the English-speaking market, for example. I realized that was very Anglo-centric, because I had English and then foreign was everybody else, but I am English, so that is my lens. But you know what I mean. So find a niche. If it's dentists, if it's translators, if it's publishers, if it's scientific houses, because people will pay for specialization. So then you're not a copywriter, you're a marketing person with a specialty in copywriting, who really understands people who sell USB cables or whatever it might be that you niche into. It will make you more credible immediately.
Chapter 1 of my book is called Niche Your Way to the Top. Niching is
I've nailed it.
It's so important. You have nailed it. All right, let's wrap it up for today's episode of How to Find More Direct Clients. Stay tuned for more engaging discussions on the ever-evolving landscape of language and digital marketing and copywriting. Until next time, do stay on your game and remember to future-proof your career in the AI era. Bye from me, your host, Jason Willis-Lee, and many thanks again to Stephen Lewis, my special guest.
Here's a fun fact about Jason. Jason was born in Aberdeen, Scotland in the UK. Thanks for tuning in to the How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, why not head over to www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com to access all our tools and resources to monetize and future-proof your freelance translation business. And don't forget to hit the plus button in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, or subscribe in Spotify to be notified when new episodes drop. For regular tips and insights, business strategy, or marketing techniques straight to your inbox, please sign up at www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com.